One chapter ends and another begins. Sammy Hagar takes over lead vocal duties from the departing David Lee Roth in Van Halen, and the result is 5150. Stay with us.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff. And Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. Pull up a chair. We've got a great episode on the way, Eric. This is a classic from our heyday.
Pull up a couch. In my
pull
case.
Up a couch. Pull up a cushion. Sit cross-legged on the floor, on the rug, whatever makes you comfortable. If you're laying
we've
down,
had people do that. We've done it. We've done it all. So yeah.
However you're joining us, we welcome you. And if it's your first time aboard, thanks for joining us. Thanks for checking us out. There's a whole bunch of other episodes you can check out. Wow, there's so much there. Scroll through. That's half the fun in finding a podcast that you like or a new podcast is to see what the back catalog looks like. And by God, we've got a back catalog that would make Sears jealous.
Who's Sears?
Sears. Remember Sears catalog? The Sears catalog?
I remember Sears, the catalog. Okay. I mean, but the store is on too.
Are you saying that joke is aged?
Well, since they pretty much are all gone, yeah. I mean, I don't think.
Are you saying that joke is as old as the Templar Knight in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade?
Maybe a few years younger.
Maybe, yeah.
I think there was a Sears catalog when the Templar Knights. And if you're watching us on YouTube, welcome aboard. Thanks for checking us out. You can go ahead and like and subscribe. That helps us in the algorithm, helps boost our searchability or people finding us, and we appreciate you doing that for us. So without further ado, we've got a great episode. We've got great guests. Eric and I are here as usual. Mr. Kuber, yes. from his comfy couch, always looks comfortable. I'm in this very hard IKEA chair. I need to get I keep looking for a chair. I need a desk chair.
As long as it's not like going down like the thing.
I've been in episodes like that in the beginning when I had my chair. I was like sinking, and then I have to like hit the hydraulics to come back up again, and then it would sink down again. It's like it's time for a new chair.
Like a timer.
And we have a couple of guests with us, once again we're mixing it up as Dean is bringing on more and more people. So we have with us Gerry Sullivan. As welcome back, sir. This was your idea for this episode, I believe.
Yes, I'm quite excited.
King of the technical difficulties.
Gerry, meet Rob.
Yes, I was
Rob. Hello, Gerry.
How you doing, Rob?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
Rob
you.
Distefano is back with us.
Distefano, yes,
he is back from his underground studio. And yeah, we're doing 5150 from Van Halen, which is great. I'm happy that we're doing this. Before we get to that, make sure you stay through this whole episode because we're going to be beta testing a new feature on our a new segment on our program called 3 Lies and a Truth. And we're going to put the panel to the test because I'm the trivia hound. Mm-hmm. So I think this is another fun way to kind of get some trivia pieces out there. We're going to give these gentlemen each 3 lies and 1 truth. They have to sort out what's true and what's the lie.
And I knew nothing about this.
Nothing
at all.
That's the most fun way is to spring. This way we get real reaction. So stay with us till later on in the episode. We're going to debut that new segment. But for now, Eric, we did 1984.
Yeah, we did. Yep.
We did an episode of 1984. So this is a great bookend episode because of what happened in between, right? This is, I think of it when I think of 1984 and 5150, not only are they 2 albums that are numbered, but I think of it as a reverse AC/DC.
Okay.
Right. Because, because when Bon Scott, we did Back in Black and Bon Scott passed away and kind of like, he was kind of on like AC/DC was popular, but they weren't as big as they got after Brian Johnson. right? Like once Back in Black came out, like AC/DC kind of went to a new level, right? With Van Halen, 1984, they had hit like the apex, like they were on the verge, like they had broken through, they had become this big band, and then splintered and shattered and kind of, well, what do you do? Like a lot of bands don't usually lose your lead singer after your biggest thing. Usually the breakup happens, you have a shitty album or things happen and it deteriorates. You don't lose your lead singer when you had your biggest success. So I was thinking, well, this is kind of like the un-AC/DC because they were already on the rise.
I'll buy that.
Right.
And I'm sure there'll be several comments to that effect as we go on. But no, I totally, I can see that.
Yeah. So, and there'll be a lot to talk about. But for now, let's do the stats as we like to do here. So this was, or as Eric likes me to say, let's leave you with some statistics.
I like the word. You got to say the word.
Statistical.
Statistical information we're going to give to you. Quite thoroughly. Actually, it's not a whole lot here, but this was released in March of 1986. So 1984 was released, New Year's Eve of 1983, I believe, right? Or New Year's Eve of 84. It came out in 84. Yeah, it came out in October. January of 84. January of 84.
Yeah.
So not 2 years later did all this stuff happen. And Van Halen regrouped and put out an album. Produced by Mick Jones, Don Landy, and Van Halen. That's kind of important because their regular producer, Ted Templeman, David Lee Roth got Ted Templeman in the divorce. So Ted Templeman went with Roth and would produce Eat 'Em and Smile. Ted Templeman actually produced Sammy Hagar's Voice of America album, which came out right before this. So Ted Templeman was kind of in the mix. There were 4 singles released from this. Why Can't This Be Love? Hit number 3. Dreams hit number 22. Love Walks In hit number 22. I love when that happens. Gerry's favorite, Best of Both Worlds, hit number 12 on the mainstream rock chart. Didn't chart on the popular chart. 6 times platinum. So that's 6 million copies out the door. Not bad. I think
not bad
for not bad for a reset. Especially in light that
I think this album was very divisive at the time. So
it was very
interesting. Yeah.
So let's start there. Let's start with Gerry, since this is his baby. This was he sent me a list and there was a lot of weird shit on there. I'm like, I he wanted to do a special effects album from Halloween and like who listens to that? Just special effects from Halloween. And then
human being.
Gerry, is that the Disney one? Is that the Disney special effects record? The haunted? Is that what you're talking about? Because I had that. I'm there, man. He
had Gregorian chants on there.
I have a wide range of interests. I'm in a basement, so I have a lot of time to discover weird things about myself.
So nestled within his list, very kind of nonchalantly, was 5150. And I'm like, that's it right there.
There you go.
Gerry, get us started off with what 5150 means to you.
This was actually my intro to Van Halen, if you will.
Oh.
So I guess I started with Van Hagar. I knew the popular songs like previous, but I wasn't really into music so much by then. So it was probably a little after this album was out for a while. I started getting into my weird. So I was mostly like Iron Maiden, that genre type of music. And then one of my best friends he was an amazing guitarist, so like he loved Eddie Van Halen, and it kind of got me to listen to this, and I was in love. So I've always been Van Hagar, if you will.
Okay.
I can appreciate David Lee Roth. He was a little too weird for me in his, and if you ever listen to his short-lived radio show that came on after Stern left, you realize he lived in his own little world, but he was a showman, which was always entertaining. But I just, the way Hagar meshed with the rest of these guys, it was like just way more fun to me. To me, they seemed way more natural as a group, the way they would mesh. Even like I was big into the what was it, Live Without a Net, the concert that came out, and so Van Halen was also the first concert I'd ever been to with my friends, and we saw them. I don't know how many times through my high school years and stuff. So I've just always been in love with them. Followed them all the way through OU812, the FUCK album, all that stuff. This album, just every song, even though it's very different, you can see where they changed because they went from being very like rock and roll-ish to me like a different sound. Now that I think because Hagar could play the guitar. Mm-hmm. It allowed Eddie to do other things, and it just. And some of the songs on here, you had asked me to do a cruising podcast at one point, and I was like, I think I'm a little behind the 80s, but Hot Summer Nights and Best of Both Worlds were played incessantly when I was driving around with my friends. So like this whole album it was kind of my entry into into their world. And you can ask my family, I really don't, my feelings of like caring about people not in my world, like when famous people die and people are like, oh my God, they're gone. I could give a crap. But when Eddie passed, I genuinely, I reached out to my friend who I hadn't talked to in like 20 years and was like, man, Eddie's dead. So
now you know how it feels.
Yeah. So it's like, these guys have been a part of my life. My family makes fun of me for it, and this album obviously was my entry into it.
Wow, so, awesome! That's an awesome story, Rob. What were you Diamond Dave before, or?
Yeah, I was definitely the original Van Halen type of guy. 1984 was like I didn't really get into them with their first few albums. I guess I was too young for that. But 1984 was when I first started really getting into them, and then listening to their back catalogs. So it was kind of weird that I was getting into them right around that transition time. And I like David Lee Roth. I think the difference is they sort of went from like a party band to like a serious band, sort of. And there's good and bad points, I think, for both of those. And I like both, but yeah, I think they get a little more serious with Hagar.
Yeah, and that seems to be part of what you can back way back when. There was a lot of speculation about why this split happened, and it turned it's easy to pin it on Roth and be like, well, the guy's just just so full of himself and just so out of control. but in retrospect, it looks like Eddie was also kind of getting tired of that from the standpoint of, we want to make some more serious music. Right. Right. And Eric Dave is like the good time. He's like the court jester of rock and roll. And I don't mean that in a bad way.
No.
I mean, there's got to be a court jester, and Roth can deliver.
He
can balance out Eddie's virtuosity with his showmanship.
And that to me was the distinction, and it blended. The marriage of that was really, what made the band, it gave it the personality that it had, I feel, because Roth was really interfering with the musicality of Eddie Van Halen. He was doing his own thing. Like it's sort of like, I'm thinking of like School of Rock actually came to mind when I was thinking about like how the approach was to this album, of them really getting serious and really starting to write some songs, including, some of the ballads, which is not really their forte in my opinion, but I can understand. I mean, Eddie's doing some God, he is like, he's stepping up his game on this record. I mean, the stuff he's doing on guitar is just outstanding. I mean, it's just like a lot of the stuff before was a lot of that repetitious, kind of shredding and, and all that thing. But here he's like, there's a staccato, the sort of the playing on certain songs is just phenomenal. And I feel like, with Sammy Hagar, who's arguably a much better vocalist than Roth, he actually has the chops to sing. And as you pointed out, Gerry plays guitar as well, but already an established artist. So for me, the balance, I don't know. At the time, I kind of can understand where some people might have thought it was somewhat kitschy, somewhat like, a lot of the bands of the period were like merging together. You had all these prog bands doing this thing, like getting together, trying to make music. It didn't quite work. Some of it did, some of it didn't. And I kind of felt like, Van Hagar is actually a rarely appropriate name for the band, because Sammy Hagar was already an established artist, right? He was already, on his own, not huge, but he was doing his own thing.
He was on the rise. He was kind of up and coming with I Can't Drive 55. I remember I bought Voice of America because that fucking song was always on MTV. I Can't Drive 55. And then I looked at the Voice of America track listing. I'm like, I want to see if I remember any of these songs. And there was a song called Dick in the Dirt. And I'm like, oh my God, I remember the line was Breakfast like, she knocked Dick in the dirt, but it was like that Sammy Hagar double entendre, stuff. And I'm like, oh wow, I remember Dick in the Dirt. But a lot of people at the time, Eric, you make a really good point, is like, like everybody was kind of like Sammy Hagar. Yeah. Because that's kind of the way it was kind of like Sammy. I remember that. It was kind of like, okay, Sammy Hagar's great, but Sammy Hagar?
But he's very, the thing, his style was very irreverent. Not that, Van Halen wasn't, of course, with David Lee Roth, but I feel like Eddie Van Halen was trying to step up his game. I think he was trying to be, trying to get to that point where he was more of an established musician rather than we're moving past the rock and roll. I want to be known as a serious musician. He built, 5150 is named after the studio that he, was a home studio, so he was already like working on, experimentation and all that kind of thing. And he started doing that in 1984. But with Sammy Hagar and he brings him in, it's like, I can't help but feel like, was it really the right fit? I don't know. I'm kind of torn, Well,
that brings up a question.
It's a very great rock album of the time. It's nostalgic. It's great songs, great riffs, but I'm still not sure.
Okay, so I had a question for later in the conversation.
How much more time do you need, Eric?
It's only been 40 years.
I don't know.
How many more listens do you need to decide? Because
I listened to
about a browser.
I'm listening to it recently, and I'm seeing like Eddie's side of it, where he's he's really on the rise of being virtuoso. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like not just the like the party band kind of thing. He's really starting to establish himself, and I wasn't sure if Sammy Hagar coming into it.
David Lee Roth liked to hang out because then his next pairing was with Steve Vai. Like he really worked well with guitars. I don't know.
Well, he tried to recreate Van Halen. I mean, that's what he tried to do with his solo band. Yeah. Eric, is it fair to say that I think this came to mind when you were talking about Eddie?
Mm-hmm.
More steak, less sizzle.
Yeah.
Right? Like he started to become more of a functional, thoughtful guitar player as opposed to just the pyrotechnics, which everyone was like, oh my God, he's melting people's brains. Yes. But on this album, he came into more, and it has to do a little bit with the production too, because Ted Templeman used to produce Eddie always on the left channel. Ted Templeman's thing is, well, I want to reproduce what you would hear in a live concert with Van Halen.
Yeah.
So Eddie would always be towards the left of the mix, with Mick Jones, who is from Foreigner, and Don Landy. They put Eddie back in the mix. He's not as prominent. And more centered in the mix. So that makes it also feel like these songs feel like, they don't feel like you hear a guitar on one side and a vocal on the other. You hear like the full arrangement.
It feels much
the balance
fuller when you listen to it. To me,
yeah,
like
it has
my
a different
difference
feel.
from with David Lee Roth versus when this started. You feel it more, like you said, kind of all around.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never been into the technical. I just listened to it type of thing, and hearing that like fact, you can like I can now really feel that difference from listening, previous to what like it has a different energy that comes through.
Yeah, absolutely.
From how it was produced.
Absolutely. Rob, question for you: was a reset inevitable? Was the before we're going to talk about 5150, but I think we need to kind of clear some of this old stuff out. Was it inevitable that this was going to happen? Was there an expiration date on David Lee Roth as far as like how far they were going to be able to take him? I don't mean as a person, but I mean as an act,
I mean, because David Lee Roth, I mean, he's a great front man and stuff, but he's also, I think he's limited. He doesn't have a great vocal range. He doesn't. His singing style doesn't lend itself to anything. He was sort of stayed in his lane, and he couldn't really deviate from that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I didn't find out about their friction until after the fact. But I mean, if you could just see David Lee Roth's first solo album, it was sort of like Van Halen, part 2. Yes. It wasn't really anything different.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's what you make. I almost thought, I was thinking about this the other day. I'm like, maybe we should have done Eat 'Em and Smile with this. It would have been an interesting conversation, but it'll probably take 2 hours. But Roth leaves. Eddie is looking for a vocalist. He actually approached someone else. He approached Patti Smythe from Scandal. Gerry, she's got that song "Goodbye to You."
Yeah,
she was the first approach, and she's like, interesting, but I'm also right now I'm 8 months pregnant, and I also don't drink. I'm not into that whole and so she passed just on like kind of the resume portion of these guys. This would not be a good situation to be in. Not that I couldn't be successful, but at the time Van Halen was just like all over these guys just partying all over the place. And she's like, that's not my thing. And then the famous story, right? Eddie Van Halen's Lamborghini mechanic. It also works on Hagar's. And he said, why don't you, why don't you call up Sammy? And Eddie was a fan of Montrose, which was a band that Hagar was in the 70s. He had actually said that. So they call him up, bring him in. And now they're reinvigorated, they're refreshed, like Eric said, and Gerry. There's a new sound coming, and Rob made a very good point. Is that Roth kind of gave us probably what would have been a Van Halen style album had he stayed, right? I really like Eat 'Em and Smile. I dig that. It's so quirky and strange in some places that I dig it as a companion to this. But 5150 is a total. It's similar enough. I think in this one, I think OU812 they really kind of honed in on what this would be. I think this one was Hagar was kind of skirting the line between Roth, especially in the opening cut of Good Enough. It's got that breakdown where he's like talking and that was Roth's kind of thing. He would like kind of scat and talk a little bit, and then they would have the song. So I think there were some nods to that. But like Eric said, Hagar's voice is just a different animal.
Yeah.
I mean, you also, I don't know if it was conscious. I would assume it was, but you got to be careful that they're not idiots. They realize that they're taking a huge, chance at their careers. Like you said, it's still divisive. Like you still talk to people and they will die on whatever hill they're on, even though, a lot of people can like both. But, you figure Hagar had to kind of figure his way. I do think he still brought the same energy that Roth did. I mean, when I loved watching him on stage because he was just as wild as Roth was, but I think he brought just more musical talent to a band that allowed him which, like Eric said, allowed Eddie to more explore what he wanted to explore. He didn't now have to drive in David Lee Roth's lane. They could go everywhere. And that's what I like. That's kind of the energy, like, to see to watch Hagar on stage work the crowd. Also, Eddie Van Halen always came off as kind of shy, as good as he can. Like, you could always see he felt kind of shy, but the whole band to me kind of enjoyed being up there, and I think a lot of that comes from how your lead sing. Because most people, a lot of Van Halen's different because you identify it with Eddie, but a lot of people identify with the lead singer. That's your connection to the audience. But he included the band a lot. He was all over the stage, bringing them up. That to me is what I kind of fell in love with. Again, not fully knowing. I knew David Lee Roth existed, kind of like what Robert said. I didn't know I knew there was friction. I didn't know it was as it was. But when I would look back to David Lee Roth, it just never got the same feeling as I did from when I started listening to this.
Is the word we're looking for options? Did the arrival of Sammy Hagar give Van Halen more options? Right? Meaning to expect, since he could do the David Lee Rothy style stuff if they wanted to, right? If they wanted to lean back into that, they could do that. But Hagar, I think the operative word is options. Like if Eddie was looking to do different things, Hagar gives him more options because he can handle. I mean, we could pick. I guess we'll go with probably my favorite song, but let's talk about Dreams. I mean, I think that's probably emblematic of what this experiment was, because you can hear Hagar delivers one of his best vocal performances, and it's soaring, and it's not, and I couldn't, I could picture Roth singing parts of this, but I can't. There are other parts I'm like, he wouldn't be able to handle it.
No. You wouldn't get the same emotional draw from Dreams. I agree. Dreams is one of my favorite. The way it starts and the second guitar solo in that near the end, listening to it while I was driving home, like that will always get my blood pumping.
Yeah.
Just the way it kind of, you feel like you're almost flying with it because of how the song he just picks it up. But being able to do that with the keyboards, all that stuff, I think it's, options is exactly the right word, because they could now do way more with a song than they could with David Lee Roth, because he wouldn't have the range in his vocals that Hagar had.
Yeah. It would have been Bozy Bop. Zitty Bop. Humana baby, humana baby, humana baby, baby doos up. Nothing against that guy. I like, but that's pretty much emblematic of that. Funny enough about this album is they had finished the album and they had 8 songs, and Mick Jones is the foreigner. He's like, guys, you need one more. Like there's not enough here. We need like one more song. So Hagar left, went home, wrote a song, and the final song that was added to the album at the very last second was Dreams. That was actually not a part of this original. Like that was almost an afterthought where Mick Jones says, "You guys, we need one more here." And it's probably, and like you said, it's probably one of their best songs. Well, Rob, what about this album kind of grabs you? That's different. That hits you in a different way than the previous lead singer.
Yeah, as I was listening to it, I think you guys had alluded to it. It's a little while before. I would try to hear David Lee Roth singing the songs as well, and like the first 3 tracks, "Good Enough," "Why Can't This Be Love," "Get Up," are songs that I could see David Lee Roth singing as well. And "Dreams" is that one song where I think that's the demarcation
Mm-hmm.
between the Roth era and the Hagar era. That's sort of the song that changed them over, I think. Because there's no way I could see David Lee Roth singing that song "Dreams." David Lee Roth isn't like a ballad type singer. It's not his it's not his way. I don't think he would want to do it, and I don't think he would be good at it either. But yeah, the Good Enough, Why Can't This Be Love, Get Up, those are the rockers that I sort of think. I sort of saw the album as like a mesh between the old to the new, because they had some Roth era type songs and then completely new type of songs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Good Enough is very much like Panama in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It sounds like Panama. And I felt the same way. It's like the first, like, once you get to Dreams, I think that's, Eric, is that a fair I think that's, Rob's right. Like, Dreams is when the album like, really kicks in. Not that the first three songs aren't good, but they're kind of like the older style vein with the even from Alex, like that, that double bass that's just like in everywhere. And then once they get to Dreams, from there on, I think they get into a different groove.
Absolutely. I mean, we had to have Sammy in there somewhere, right? I mean, he has got to bring his own, because he's already an established songwriter, so there had to be something that is distinctly his, his voice. And I'm talking about like, not just his voice, but his songwriting and, that kind of thing. So it was, different. And, so for some people, it just wasn't their cup of tea. I mean, it was just as like, wow, they're doing like this sort of like a song very much of its time, but it reaches an emotional high that I don't think previous stuff had ever reached in that sense.
Yeah.
Like, as you pointed out, David Lee Roth is always the clown, and it was always that it might have gotten almost there, but maybe in Eddie's mind, like let's do something, let's get it there. But like he would always just go off on his own tangent and just kind of tip the boat over in that way. But it was just I mean, but the question is like, were people prepared for this? Were they really looking for this kind of sound in the Van Halen camp, which is interesting, so it makes it, but I think the album is just rock solid. I mean, it's just, it works, but I just can't help but feel, was it the right balance? I don't know, I just don't know, it's easy to question it. Only because Sammy Hagar is already, what was he thinking? Does anybody know what he was thinking about joining such an established band?
No, I mean, I don't think there was I don't think he had any hesitation or qualms about it. I mean, they were all on the Warner Brothers label.
Yeah.
He owed Warner Brothers one more album. So so he wanted to go to Van Halen, and Warner Brothers said, well, you got to give us one more album. So he did put out a solo album in '87.
Yeah.
To fulfill that contract so he could continue with Van Halen. So he, it didn't seem like there was anything that was going to stop him. I think I was very skeptical about this until the album came out. I remember when I listened to the album, I'm like, okay.
I was with you when you bought it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't, because I kind of liked Sammy Hagar, but he was just.
Of you buying it?
There was no question of me buying
were you debating of buying it or not?
No, I was debating what I remember when it happened. And I remember saying to myself when it happened, I'm like, Roth is going to, I said, much like Aerosmith, Roth is going to rejoin. Like when Steve Tyler left Aerosmith, and like, I was like, and he came back, I was like, Roth will be back in Van Halen at some point. And in the 90s, I was proven right that he did go back. But up until the time the album came out, I wasn't down. I was just like, kind of like, it was at the time. Again, you got to go back to that mindset. Sammy Hagar was a strange choice.
Yeah.
Because he was already an established act. He was already kind of like, I can't drive 55. And he had his whole thing that he was like kind of working up. He used to wear this yellow jumpsuit with the red stripe. Yeah. Like he had his own gig and thing that he was doing. And it's like, well, why is he joining like Van Halen, it doesn't make sense. And then when 5150 came out, I bought it and I put it on. I'm like, oh, okay. Like
why? And that's the question. Like, why would you want to join? Because if you're already doing your own thing, like, where's, what's he feeling at this point? Does he want to do this? Is it,
I think he felt, I saw an interview recently and he's like, yeah, this was like a prestigious, like he felt honored that he was being asked. Like he felt like, wow, like, okay. And again, it was a strange thing because this band was so huge.
Yeah.
Again, it wasn't like when these bands are on the back end of it and people start leaving and they start like bringing in singers and they bring in new guitar. Exactly. or even, well, I'll go one more obscure. Mitch Malloy, who after Gary, actually before Gary Cherone, or was it after Gary Cherone?
I think it was after.
They hired this guy, Mitch Malloy. He co-wrote one song and never ended. He's like, this doesn't feel right. It seems like these guys have issues. It seems like they want Dave. Like it doesn't, and Mitch Malloy was supposed to be like this powerhouse vocalist. And Mitch Malloy's like, you know what? Yes, thanks, but no thanks. He goes, I don't think this is going to be the right thing for me. So, but at the time in '84, Hot for Teacher, Panama, Jump, these songs were on MTV incessantly. David Lee Roth was always on MTV doing little clips and making little things and doing contests. And like you couldn't have had a bigger band at their apex for something as disastrous as this to happen. Like I said, this happens in bands that are kind of like, right? Like either they're on their way up and they haven't hit the big time yet and that change. Like AC/DC, like the AC/DC's paying their dues and they've got some good stuff, Dirty Deeds, and they're there, but then Brian Johnson brings them to like the next level.
Yeah.
Van Halen had hit the next level with Roth and then just like gets a rug pull. And it's like, okay, what do we do? Sammy Hagar. At the time I was like, that equation doesn't compute, right? Anybody jump in?
I just give the credit to Eddie because I think he just wanted to just forge ahead. And I just like, now's the time to get, we did the party thing. Great success. What's next? Let's do something much like, like Fleetwood Mac with Rumors, right? It was the big party, right? And then after that, let's do something different. Let's go, let's start to establish ourselves as not as necessarily I wouldn't say a joke band, but like let's really dig in and like let's do something solid. And I feel like that this album it delivers on that front. I mean, they're writing like great songs as opposed to like the sort of like the jokes and the Roth doing his vocal things and talking and all this like all this kind of stuff. And now they're establishing themselves as we're songwriters. We're and I don't know who wrote what specifically on the record. It's credited all of them wrote.
Yeah, they all got credit. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know, but you could kind of tell, I think, that obviously with Dreams and, but yeah, I just think that I give all the credit to him because I just think he was ready to move it forward and to establish. I mean, they're getting older at this point, let's do something equally as great, but musically more challenging, I feel. Or, and let people, let their heads spin a little bit, I think they probably enjoyed that, the fact that fans were like, what, so let's surprise them. Let's do something, if an artist can do that, then I'm in, if they continue to do the same thing over and over and over again, then it starts to get stale. And then they just, there's no
AC/DC's done it for 50 years.
Well, I mean,
they're probably the exception to the rule. Like if there's an exception, it's AC/DC.
Yeah, but it's like, but you fall too comfortable in that routine. You got, sometimes you got to break out. You got to establish yourself musically as a tour de force. And if everybody thinks that Eddie Van Halen thinks he's such a guitar virtuoso, this is the album for me that really kind of said that. And for everything going forward from this record, the production, it's more balanced and you hear a lot more of him. He's doing things that I'd never heard him do before. He might have done it, but maybe it was lost in the mix, right? Because it's that polished sound, always that always had that certain sound to it. But here it's like you could really hear every note, everything he's doing. And it's just I can't say enough about his playing on this record. I think it's probably my favorite.
Yeah, a lot of good like little licks in between stuff.
Oh man,
I think this is a good point for us to now start talking about the album. I think we'll put the Roth to rest, except for one thing I have to say to Rob. I don't feel tardy. We'll put Roth to rest now. I think we need to talk about. Let's start to talk about this album. So let me kick it over to Gerry because he was gonna go for it. Gerry,
I'm talking.
I cut you off.
Yeah, I was, going with what Eric was saying about Eddie. He's one of the few where he was like the musician of the band. When like you have Angus Young, if we're going to talk about AC/DC, he's a great guitarist. But I don't think people put him like musically on the same level as Eddie as far as, being able to do so many different things. One of my favorites is Iron Maiden, which they went through a song, singer change in the beginning. Bruce Dickinson, I think, took them to a different level. They had, partway through, they always had two guitarists, one left. So they replaced him. That guy wanted to come back. So then they have three guitarists. So the songs are like 20 minutes long. But even with them, you have three well-known guitarists, but they're not known like Eddie Van Halen always, people talking, they always talk of him as the musician, not the lead guitarist. He's the musician.
Yeah.
And this is kind of where, like you said, it grows. And you can kind of see he just loves making the music. I do think having the other side of the scale of, Michael Anthony was insane. He loved to party. So they still had that kind of, they can still connect with that on their fans, being a little wild type. But, I agree with you. This is where Eddie was now finally able to be the musician that he knew he was, that he could bring to people. And I think it all meshed well. People liked how it continued, because it didn't become weird. David Lee Roth, one last part, going with Steve Vai's he's a guitarist. It's weird when he tries to be in bands. I've loved him and all his work.
That's a great quote. It's weird when he tries to be in bands.
No, he's absolutely on point with that. That absolutely, he's just the biggest.
Also, him, Satriani, that type. They're guitarists. Yeah. They'll have backing bands, but when they try and be in a band, it just comes off odd. Even though I like some of their work, but it's just a different thing. Eddie Van Halen meshed with the band.
Mm-hmm. Ironically enough, Joe Satriani is in Chickenfoot with Sammy Hagar and Michael Anthony. Mm-hmm. And Chad Smith from Red Hot Chili Peppers. Right. They're in Chickenfoot. So go figure. But
he's older. He's changing.
Okay, there you go. And he's bald. Here's one of the things that, when the song Jump came out, everybody was like kind of getting on top of Van Halen for using the synthesizer.
Yeah.
And what I noticed in 5150 is the synthesizer is there, but Eddie started to do something very interesting with it. If you listen to Love Walks In or Dreams, those are both synthesizer heavy songs, but what Eddie does with Love Walks In, he doubles the synthesizer with an electric piano. So he actually creates a different sound. He's got the synth, that 80s synth, but with a piano underneath it. And then with Dreams, he does the same thing. He does a lot of synthesizer work, but he doubles it with an acoustic guitar underneath. That you hear both sounds. You hear the acoustic guitar underneath the synthesizer, kind of defining the sounds, and then the electric piano doubling the synth on Love Walks In, creating new textures. So kind of trying to elevate that 80s like synthy sound by actually making it into an arrangement, Rob, layering in different things, right? That's I think the sophistication that we started to see from the quote unquote new Van Halen.
Right. Yeah. Like they had used synthesizers and keyboards even back to Women and Children first, but I think they played them through a guitar amp. So so the synthesizers back then sounded like guitars.
Yeah.
And on this album, from 1984 into this album, especially this one, the synthesizers sounded like synthesizers.
Yeah.
You had that feeling that you were hearing it. It wasn't like in the background or something. It was up front.
Yeah, but it gave it a different. Like I said, though, like pairing the synthesizer with other instruments gave it a different sound, though, too.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little off-putting to fans who are so used to the guitar and guitar effects, But I heard some comments, even people comparing it to like it's too proggy, like Eddie Van Halen is getting too like like with the keyboard, like Geddy Lee, for example, at Rush, like he would, they bring the synthesizer in their music, which after a while people started, it's kind of wore out its welcome. But in this case, he might have, but the fact that he could play, the synthesizer so well and establish those, and layer those notes, and it's very well orchestrated and well used compared to some people just playing like, it's not like Jump where it's like, it's just notes, Here it's, he's actually doing something with it, which I admire. I think he's bringing that virtuosic, those virtuosic notions to what he's doing, even on the keyboard there, and which is, and it just proves how much of a brilliant musician he was. So
yeah, there was definitely that growth from the basic, the basic Jump riff, which was good. It fit for what it was. And then the leap that he would make of, we're going to incorporate this. We're going to make more of an effort to not shy away from it. And if the fans don't like it, too bad. But you know what? The fans loved it. They ate this. Yeah. They literally ate this album up. The song 5150. You guys are all familiar with it. It's your favorite. One of your favorites.
Perfect song.
Okay. I listened to this album so much recently that I started to think that the song by the Foo Fighters, Everlong, was inspired by 5150. There are parts of the song 5150 that sound like Everlong to me. Or as Christopher Walken would say when he hosted Saturday Night Live, Foo Fighters.
Wow, I thought we'd get through a whole one without
no, that's I think that I heard Dave Grohl mention
really
as such.
Okay, yeah. See? Still got the ear.
Maybe not specifically the song, but I know Eddie was a huge influence, so I know that much.
Listen to 5150 and then listen to the song Everlong. It's not the whole song, but there are parts of 5150. I'm like, wow, that kind of sounds a lot like Everlong.
I hear some of Drop Dead Legs in 5150 too.
Yeah,
so part of the guitar it's very similar.
Yeah. There's I mean, until Eddie totally sheds that whole thing. He's got some tricks that he always goes to. He may do it in different keys and different styles, but there's always, and that's what makes his style so recognizable, is that there are things that he does that kind of like peg him. A lot on this album is just a lot of fills. Like besides the solos, there's just a lot of just phrases that he's kind of pulling off in between lyrics and in between, kind of choruses and in between, where Sammy's singing, there's just be these different licks, which again, that's the steak and not the sizzle, right? That's him. Yep. That's him thinking as a musician and a guitarist of, what can I add? We'll get to the flash later, and I'll do all that kind of stuff later. But what can we do and like I said, to build this song? Let's put a keyboard. Let me then double it with an acoustic guitar. Now let me put some phrases in here too, right? Which does make the music more sophisticated, and maybe that's what people loved and people hated, right? Because it wasn't that, the stripped down balls to the wall Van Halen assault. This was kind of like Van Halen, literally 2.0,
Yeah.
I mean, get the song "Get Up" for me. Just the riff in that it's so unusual. It's not unlike anything I've heard. It goes from like used to the rhythm, and then it's song like "Jump," and then you have that long extended solo with it's like, but this is like it's interesting from the get-go, like right the whole song. You don't even need a solo.
The drums in the beginning.
Oh, it's phenomenal.
Yeah. To me, it sounded a lot like Hot for Teacher.
Yeah.
But once it gets going, it has that chugging, like that. Oh man, it's just so. Yeah, this is, but he's like stepping up his game here. I mean, I can't, like I said, I can't say enough about his playing on this record. It's so interesting to listen to, and I almost wish it was an instrumental album. Let's take Sammy out of it, man. I want an instrumental Eddie Van Halen album.
I can arrange that. I can arrange that. I have the tools.
I think wasn't this their first album that
without an instrumental?
Yeah.
It was the first Van Halen album that did not have an instrumental on it, which is kind of, again, I mean, Inside is close. I mean, it's not really Inside, has a bunch of lyrics, but that seems like it was going to be the closest to like a throwaway kind of, that could have been like an instrumental.
Yeah, that feels like they were just hanging out and someone recorded them without knowing. Like Michael Anthony just started playing a bass.
Roth could have sang that song,
riffing around it.
That's like a Roth song.
It's enjoyable, but
because it's a lot of like studio chatter and stuff. Side two, Gerry, opens with "Best of Both Worlds." What are your feelings about that song?
Oh, like I said, that was one of our cruising songs. The opening guitar riff, and whenever I hear that song, they always do the same kind of dance on the stage.
I was watching the video today.
Line up. They do that every time I saw them. They always line up and they march across the stage. And then when the song explodes, they go their separate ways and then they come back. And a lot of times that song was paired with, they love to go into Cabo Wabo later on with it. Like they like to mix it up, make that a medley. But just those first few chords, when that comes out, to me, it just brings me back to sitting with my stupid friends in someone's basement or driving around in a car.
Yeah.
Because that was like one of our cruising songs, and it will always get that emotion out of me. That's definitely up there as one of my favorite songs.
Add it to the playlist, Dean.
You know what? It didn't hurt that this album came out in March, which perfectly set it up to be like a summer album.
Yeah.
Like that and that's what this, like, that's everything that this album needed.
Nights. I mean, what more could you ask for?
Yeah, Summer Nights, Best of Both Worlds, Love Walks In. I mean, this is the perfect summer album to be listening to on a beautiful, and I remember many times listening to, that whole summer I was devouring this cassette. I had it on cassette. I was just devouring this cassette. Just absolutely. Actually, I have the vinyl. I should have brought the album out. Gerry would have loved to see the vinyl with the Caldor sticker on it.
I love that stuff. Yes.
Why Can't This Be Love? That's probably the most, non-emblematic, because that's so synth heavy. I think Rob made a really good point. Like the first three songs are almost kind of like old like we're gonna, here's some old business we're gonna clean up, and kind of here's some throwbacky stuff, and then we're gonna kind of move forward from there. I think the thing that surprised me about this album, maybe the revelation, is how well Hagar could sing. Like, I think that we need to we've talked a lot about Eddie, but I think we need to give Sammy Hagar a lot of credit, because he had an unenviable job. He almost had he was almost in a no-win position. It was like kind of like the deck was stacked against him. I Can't Drive 55. It was kind of like, okay, But the stuff he does on this vocally, they really put him through his paces. And I think we got to give him credit for that, because I think that's what made it the difference. If he had just kind of came in and sang, it would kind of be like, okay, yeah, but he like in Dreams, really kind of going into the upper register, really kind of really kind of delivering it in a similar enough but different way than Roth. There are some similarities. You can kind of make a few connections, but then there's a whole other side to Sammy that is his alone, that he brought to it. Rob, is that kind of fair to say? Like, I think we have to kind of acknowledge Hagar in this Van Hagar equation.
And I think one of the things that made it the transition to him a little better was believe it or not, was Michael Anthony. He goes sort of under the radar because his backing vocals help a lot of songs. And I think his backing vocals sort of helped Sammy Hagar find his place in the band, because it sort of kept that continuation, but allowed Sammy Hagar to shine in a way.
Yeah, and it gave it that comfortable Van Halen feeling when you still heard the same backing vocals. Now, just a side note about Michael Anthony. Talk about a guy that got done dirty. Right around this time, I think around the album 1984, they made Michael Anthony sign everything away. They said, you need to sign this. You're like an employee now. You're not going to get any songwriting credits. You're not going to get any of this. You're not going to get any of that. Sign it, or find something else to do. And he signed. And he signed. Wow. And when Hagar left and was going to come back the second time, they were not asking Michael Anthony, and Hagar says, if you don't ask Michael Anthony, I'm not coming back. Like, what are you doing? Like, if they just did him dirty. He was there from the beginning, and he's part of the band. It's like, oh, it's like you're getting demoted now. It's like you're now you're a cashier. You're not a manager anymore. So strange. Anyway, that's just a little side note about Mr. Michael Anthony.
Is there a reason why, though? Like, why?
I don't know. I think it's just the Van Halen brothers kind of. I don't know if it was their substance abuse issues, ego. I mean, there's a whole other side to the Van Halen story with Eddie and Alex about how they interact with people, or how they choose to interact with people, or some people might call it revisionist history from their angle of how things went down. Like with Sammy leave. I mean, all these, it seems like all these relationships have an expiration date with these guys. Like something happens, then all of a sudden they think they had a longing for like, oh, it would be great to get Dave back in. And then they bring him in and say, forget it. They record 2 songs and they're like, oh, we remember what it was like. And then they get nostalgic. Oh, it would be nice to get Sammy back in.
We stop this.
And so then then they get nostalgic for Sammy, and then they patch it up with Sammy. Then he leaves, and then they get nostalgic for Dave and bring him back again. So the Van Halen brothers were problematic in that, and I don't know if it's more personality or it was more of the struggles that Eddie. Eddie had a lot of stuff that he was going through. The interesting thing about this album, Eric, is in the age of MTV. They made no videos. They did not make any music videos. They did that concert that Gerry likes, Live Without a Net, which was after the fact.
Yeah.
They did a clip for the song Dreams, but it was the Blue Angels pilots flying through the sky in an era where image was everything, and especially how virile Van Halen was on MTV, right? How they were always such a big presence. To not do any videos,
that's surprising,
and have this album be as popular as it was is pretty amazing as well.
It's surprising, but not surprising, given the fact that this was like I said. I mean, he had established his own recording studio. He's like trying to push the music forward. Yeah, I'm not. It makes sense. But on the other hand, it's like, but they're not used. You're used to seeing that from them.
Yeah. Everything was visual back in the 80s. Like, you had to have a video. Like, that was right, Rob. That was like part and parcel.
It helped sold it. Yeah.
Like, we need to, they want to, especially with something like this, like, you'd want to see that, but they did not do anything. It was like an interesting kind of strategy, but it seemed to have paid off.
It's possible that they maybe did it because when you think about it, Roth was almost the exact opposite. Everything was video oriented with him.
You're right. You're right.
And I think they wanted to separate themselves from him in that sense, you know. Give me a bottle of anything and a glazed donut. You know,
that's right. Yeah, he was making the long form videos. He was dressing up in the fat suit as the producer, and I mean, it was good fun. Like that was all good fun. But yeah, that might have been their response is let's do the anti-Roth thing and not make anything and let the music speak for itself, right? And not be this like, and maybe they didn't know what the image was going to be, or maybe they didn't know if this was going to be successful at all. So why push the chips in when we're not entirely sure anyway? You know, this. You know, I don't know what the thought was. Why they didn't make it
be scary as all hell.
Yeah.
You know, like they like you said, they left at the top, and now they're trying to bring in something that's very different, you know, and you risk, you hope you gain new fans. You hope you don't lose all your old fans. You know, it's a tough position to be in.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they made it work.
They did. Yeah. And this is just, I think it's a forgotten classic because I think a lot of people kind of look at the later stuff like OU812 and some of those, you know, where they did kind of really fit into the, you know, get into their stride. And this one is kind of like that in-betweener. And I was reading some reviews. There are still people today that hate this album.
They don't like.
They're like, Sammy Hagar is like the worst lyricist ever. His stuff is so hokey. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, it's rock and roll. It's going to be about sex, love, drinking, or a car, or metaphors for all those. So you know, we're not reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, and he definitely leaned into the times too. I mean, you think about some of the stuff that was out there at the time, and he was he knew what he was doing. So you bring that in, and they kind of needed that to stay afloat.
Yeah, and I think they matured as they went along. I think they did find their groove. Like I said, especially with OU812, I think that really kind of became okay. Yeah, this is what Van Halen is now, and people were like, okay, you know. One question before we get to our new segment, Gerry, is this term Van Hagar, is that a diss or a compliment?
I think it's to me.
Well, let me before you answer that,
I know the company tried to make them.
Warner Brothers actually wanted them to change the name to Van Hagar.
That, I think, to me, if they did that, would have been an insult. Because it was still driven by Van Halen. It's not an like I say it just to signify that's
era,
the side of that fence I would kind of fall on. But that would have been an insult. Like that, if I was Eddie and Alex, I would have been insulted because they brought him into the band, and yes, it was different. Yes, it would, but it's still, and it's. Most people think of Van Halen, they think of Eddie Van Halen. So at that point, it's an insult. I don't think it's an insult like when people use it to distinguish which side of the coin they're on.
Okay.
But if they ever changed it, that would have been insane.
Same question. Is it a diss or a compliment to refer to them as Van Halen? Like Gerry says, in some ways, it lets you know exactly what you're referring to.
Yeah, I think, as what Gerry said, I think it's people use it as a demarcation point, just to distinguish between the two different eras. It just makes it simpler. The
other era wasn't Van Roth.
That's
because his name didn't start with H.
There you go. That's why. All right, it's time to uncork a new segment we've got here. It's called 3 Lies and a Truth. So I'm gonna give these gentlemen 4 statements. 3 of them are false. Only one of them is true. I'm gonna read them off, and then we'll go in order. Just give me your answer, and then I'll get an answer from everybody, and then we'll go through. Okay. So here come the 4 statements. 3 of them are lies. 1 is true. A. In addition to Patti Smythe, Daryl Hall was asked to join Van Halen after David Lee Roth. B. 5150 is Van Halen's only number one album until their first greatest hits album. C. Eddie Van Halen invented the tapping technique that it was used so famously on Eruption. The tapping. D. The term 5150 is police code for a homicide. Okay. A. In addition to Patti Smythe, Daryl Hall was asked to join Van Halen after Roth. B. 5150 is Van Halen's only number one album until their first greatest hits album. C. Eddie Van Halen invented the tapping technique used in Eruption. D. 5150 is police code for a homicide. Eric, 3 of those are patently false. Only 1 is true. What's it going to be?
Man.
Wait. Go ahead, Eric.
I think I know this.
Want me to skip you?
I'm going to say that I'm going to say B.
B is true.
Yeah.
5150 is Van Halen's only number one album until their first greatest hits album. B. Rob.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go with Eric, and I'm pretty sure it's B.
B. 5150 is Van Halen's only number one album until their first greatest hits album. Gerry. 3 lies and 1 truth.
I'm going to say, I'm not sure. I know 5150 is police code. I thought it was for a crazy person in the street.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I'm I think it would be kind of crazy if they named it after a murder. So, okay, D is not it. But the other one I was going to lean towards is B. I'll say
B.
So I
5150
guess
is Van Halen. 5150 is Van Halen's only number one album until their first greatest hits album. Okay.
I know he didn't invent the tapping.
Okay, so all 3 of you picked the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
and
the first
wrong.
the first lie, 5150 is police code for a mentally unstable person. It is not police code for a homicide. Okay. So that's a lie. Eddie Van Halen did not invent the tapping technique used in Eruption. Actually, Steve Hackett from Genesis invented the tapping technique.
I knew that.
So that leaves us with 5150 is Van Halen's only number one album until their first greatest hits album. And A, in addition to Patti Smythe, Daryl Hall was asked to join Van Halen after Roth. The truth of the matter is, in addition to Patti Smythe, Daryl Hall was asked to join Van Halen after David Lee Roth. He just revealed it to Sammy Hagar on an episode of Daryl's House. He said, Sammy Hagar said, crap. Hey, Sammy Hagar said, I heard some stories about Eddie coming to see you. And Daryl Hall said, Eddie Van Halen came to see me before you were approached and asked would I be interested. And he said, I thought it might have been a joke, but it seemed like he was serious. And I said, no, I'm good with what I'm doing right now. Because that was in the middle of Hall & Oates' major run. 5150 is Van Halen's first. 5150 is Van Halen's first number one album. They would have the next 3 would be number ones with Sammy. OU812 for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge and Balance. They actually had 4 number ones in a row. So, Daryl Hall, you're a rich girl. I can't see,
oh my God.
I can't see the 80s Daryl Hall with the suits and the private eyes and all that kind of stuff.
But they got that guy. What was it from Extreme?
Larry Sharon. Yeah, well, he's a little more rock. Daryl Hall is like Blue-Eyed Soul.
But nowhere near like voice that Sammy Hagar has. I mean, come on.
What's that, Gerry?
What would have Oates done without Hall?
I don't know. He would have cried in his oats. He would have sowed his oats.
Yeah. Finally, I got rid of him.
Yeah.
He would have toured as and Oates.
He could be assistant producer on Howard Stern's program and substitute for Baba Booey. Right? That's the famous thing. He looked like John Oates when they had the mustache. Gary Delabate.
Oh man!
So that was 3 Lies and a Truth. I think that was fun, right? That was a fun exercise. So we're gonna do those going forward in our music and our movie episodes. It's a fun thing. Hopefully at home, I don't know let us know on social media what your guess was. But it was Daryl Hall. Actually, maybe I'll post the clip. There's a clip of it. Of them having the conversation about it. So maybe I need to post proof. So as people don't say, oh, it's full of it. There's actually a clip. I'll put it on our Facebook page too of them sitting face to face and Daryl Hall saying, yeah, Eddie asked me. So as we wind this up, I know we talked about some of our faves, but let's go through some favorite tracks. We'll save Gerry for last. So Rob, what do you got from Van Hagar that you like? That's different from Women and Children First and Van Halen 2 and all that stuff.
Believe it or not, Get Up it wasn't like when this album first came out, that wasn't my favorite, but over the years, Get Up has been the one that I like the most on this album.
Scorcher.
Yeah, it's a good rocker. I the guitar work on it is great.
Yeah.
I love the keyboards and the synthesizers, but the guitar rocker ones are my favorites.
Still, the classic Eddie sounding stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Eric, what do you got?
Get Up, Summer Nights.
Wow, Get Up. It seems like a hidden gem.
Yeah.
All right.
Summer Nights and 5150 are the three.
All right. I'll pick it up there then and go and I'll take your 5150 because that seemed to be a song I forgot about.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I was looking at the track list, I'm like 5150. Is that? I was thinking, oddly enough, the trivia. I'm like, is that an instrumental or is that something? I couldn't remember what 5150 was. And then when I heard, I'm like, oh shit. And the more I was like, wow, like really a great, technically album closer. Inside is kind of like, kind of a throwaway. So I'm going to go with 5150, and I have to go with Dreams. I used to play that song all the time. Any opportunity I had, I would just play Dreams because it just has that, like Gerry says, has this uplifting sound. And Hagar is just, it really shows what he can do. Anybody can scream, in a studio, anybody could scream. The great thing about that Best of Both Worlds tour video is Sammy's performance is spot on. Like he's not like flattening notes or anything. I mean, he's delivering exactly the performances that were on the record. So a lot of those videos are on YouTube and check them out. Again, he kind of, really like leapt in the respectability meter back then, because it was kind of goofy with the Can't Drive 55 and, that whole thing. And then he kind of joins and puts in vocal performances like that's like, wow.
Mm-hmm.
And then it only got like I said, with OU 812, like Black and Blue and just, so much good stuff that they had on the horizon. So Gerry, we're going to leave the last word for you on favorite tracks.
I'm actually going to copy you, Dean. Dreams.
Yeah.
That gets, it's just all very, like you said, emotional, uplifting. I'll say it again, the second solo in that, the way that just, you almost feel like you're flying as it like crescendos into it. And then 5150, there's something about everything seems so smooth in how all the parts of the song transition into each other. And it just, like from the start of it all the way to the end, like it just feels like everything is right where it's supposed to be. And I don't know what it is about it, but just the way, like that opening riff and just the way it all kind of, you go through different changes, of the feel of the song, but something about it, everything just is smooth, and it's just, I could listen to that one nonstop, constantly. So yeah, I'm with you, Dean.
And
Dreams and
honorable mention to Best of Both Worlds for like the arena song.
Yes,
it's like the like fist pumping in the arena, like yes.
Can I say something about Best of Both Worlds?
Sure, go for it.
I was watching some videos on YouTube, and one thing I came across, and now I can't get out of my head, is if you listen to Best of Both Worlds, listen to Kool and the Gang Celebrate, and they sound very similar.
Really? Celebration by Kool and the Gang? Like Celebrate Good Times? Come on.
Part of it sounds very similar.
All right. So we have Foo Fighters on one end with Everlong, and now we have Celebrate for Best of Both Worlds. All right, so it looks like maybe Van Halen's not that original after all. Maybe they're just a bunch of plagiarizers.
You're ruining it for me.
They're like the new Led Zeppelin thieves, damn thieves, copping licks. Anybody got some final thoughts before we close it out? All right, a lot of silence.
Great record.
Yeah, great album. There's a 2023 remaster on Spotify.
And it's actually pretty good.
Yeah, check it out.
Very good mix.
Really nice. This is just a really great sounding album as well. That's the beauty of this is it's nice to listen to, and that kind of maybe made the transition a little bit better too. There was nothing strange or weird about the album.
Yeah.
They didn't, they were going for a certain sound, and I think they achieved it. Like I said, it kind of opened up the door, and it was almost like this was like a proof of concept album. It's like, okay, here's a new vocalist. We want to try some different things. Here's what it's going to be like, and people ate it up, and then they just leaned into it. Right? They just said, okay, we got the buy-in. Now let's really see what we can do. And then you got stuff like Pound Cake and, all the they never stop with the innuendo. I mean, these guys are like 40 something. Still, for a lawful carnal knowledge, it's like, okay, I know what the initials are. Okay. Oh, you ate one too? Brilliant. Yeah, okay. Now, Oh, you ate one too was supposedly a response to David Lee Roth's Eat 'em and Smile title. But Roth, Roth's fortunes wouldn't be as successful. Like his album after Eat 'em and Smile, Skyscraper, was less. It had, Living It Just Like Paradise. It was, Billy Sheehan left at that point. Steve Vai, that would be one more for him. And, the bloom was kind of off the rose for Roth. And that's the thing is, I think that's what Van Halen was looking for, was like, we need a long-term plan. We need longevity.
Yeah.
And we may not get it with, Dave is great and he brought us this far. But if we want to make music that's going to sustain, I think that's where Eddie's head was, is we're going to need a change. And they had all gotten tired of it, and Roth was also like, oh, Eddie, you're doing too many other things. Like you're doing all this other working with other people and you're not concentrating on Van Halen. So there was a lot there. There's a lot of articles you guys can research and read yourself. But for us, that's going to do it for this episode of the 3324 podcast about the album 5150. There's a lot of numbers in there.
A lot of numbers.
Just remember the 3324. That's the most important one, because that's where you're going to get your best podcasting for music and movies each week. We're going to bring it to you. If you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. There's somewhere down there. That helps us. And it also lets you know when we've got new episodes coming out. So that's a good one. Gerry, I'm glad we got your technical difficulties straightened out.
Thank you for your patience.
So we could get you, now I'm just going to have to reel in the tin can and the string from your house. You're going to have to reel it all the way back in. It's miles, and it took us a while to get the can to you. So now I'm going to have to go and get the can and bring it and reel up all that string. Yeah. Did that ever work, by the way? The tin can and the string? That was like a thing, right?
Remember? From somebody. Yeah.
It worked? Well, that's because you're just talking. It's like the same distance. It wasn't the can didn't really do anything.
I think it's kind of the same concept of like
speaking.
No, it does work, but it's okay. Obviously not from Connecticut to Poughkeepsie really
not as good as the internet does. What are you giving away my address for? What's that all about? Tell people.
Well, who knows? Maybe you're the one in Poughkeepsie.
That could be. That could be, or POC as they like to call it, apparently. Anyway, that's going to do it. Gerry, thank you so much for not only suggesting this album, and it was a great like kind of listen for me, and so I'm so glad you kind of picked it. It really kind of brought up a lot of memories for me, which is what the great thing about music is. If you were there when it came out, you've got those circuits and that circuitry connected to it. And this was such a vivid a vivid memory for me. So thank you, Gerry, for that. I really appreciate you selecting it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It was awesome.
Rob, thanks so much for joining us on this episode. You got your little Van Halen nod on your T-shirt there.
Yeah.
He's
up
right
there.
He's on the neck somewhere. And what is
Right
that shirt
there.
like? That shirt's like the best guitar players. Is
And
that
it
what
gives all their. It's made out of all their names.
Oh.
The guitar.
Okay,
Oh,
so here's okay. I don't want this to be embarrassing for you, but is if Lindsey Buckingham is not on that shirt, I'm afraid you're not going to be able to wear that shirt anymore.
He is on it. He is on it.
Okay. Take a snapshot of his name on that shirt and send it to me. I just need proof.
Sure.
I can't see it. And then that shirt's allowed back on. It's allowed back. You can certainly wear it again. Wear it anytime you want. But thank you, Rob, as well for joining us. And of course, Eric and I. He's going to be glued to that comfy couch. I'm going to be in this tough, hard plastic IKEA seat. But we're doing it for you. We're going to be here next week, each and every week, giving you what we think is the best in music and movie podcasting. And we appreciate you joining us. Check us out on social media, won't you? We're on Facebook. We've got a great group of people over there. We're also on Instagram. You can kind of check out the same content there. And for Gerry, for Robert, and for Eric, this has been Dean asking you not to be kind and rewind. No, that's our movie jargon. We're going to catch you on the flip side.
You've been listening to the 3324 podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 podcast and on Twitter at 3324p to join the conversation.